Hi there, I'm Richard Hill, the host of eCom 1. Welcome to episode 173. In this episode, we have Tommy Atkins, founder at Identity Agency. We chat all things brand, the distinct difference between branding and marketing. Pretty obvious for some, but I know quite a lot of you get this wrong or get a little bit confused when we focus on branding and what you need to focus on with your branding. Why focusing on brand building is so important in e-commerce, probably more than most industries. How many stores out there that look very, very similar, and by investing in your brand, your branding, and certain things that you may not think are branding will really elevate you and help you stand out. And then we dive into dealing with loneliness, which is not really a topic that's been spoken about so much, but running a business can be quite a challenging time. We talk about the difficulties and the loneliness of running your own business and some of the things that Tommy does, some great ideas in there about dealing with some of those more challenging times. And obviously so much more in this one. If you enjoy this episode, which I'm sure you will, please hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. Now, let's head over to this fantastic episode. Welcome to the show, Tommy. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks for having me on. It's a podcast that I've listened to quite a lot. I'm genuinely excited to be here.
Oh, that's great to hear. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I think before we get into the nitty-gritty, it'd be great to introduce yourself and tell us a story about sort of your sort of history of starting the agency and building it into what it is now.
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely a different story. So my name's Tommy. I run Identity Agency. We're a creative agency based in Lincoln. So we're a small startup, really. Been going about 2.5 years. I started the business, as you were alluding to, while I was at university. So I went to uni quite late. I left school when I was 17. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Ended up working as a joinery apprentice.
Oh, different.
And as you can probably tell from, I don't really suit the construction site. I'm far too feminine. I like having, soft hands.
Manicures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that didn't work out. And while I was there, that really gave me the sort of oomph to think, what do I want to do in life? And I didn't know, but I decided to go back to college and do my A-levels to kind of, push myself further down the education path to try and, give myself the best sort of chance of a decent life as I could, really. So I went to college, which is where I originally did law. Then I decided to study that at university.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I had a friend in my first year of uni who was a graphic designer. And at this point, I didn't have any graphic design experience at all. But as a lot of people do at uni, my attendance wasn't brilliant. It wasn't terrible. But instead of
hope my son isn't listening to this.
Yeah, if you are, going to classes are really important.
Go to school every day, son.
I definitely recommend it. It's going to be a long podcast.
Unless it's Wednesday morning, because Wednesday nights are normally £2 a pint. But
so anyway, I was attending all my classes, and one of the things that I did was play a lot of kind of computer games. I'm generally quite nerdy, as a lot of agency owners are, I think. I was playing Rocket League, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, kind of football with cars. And me and my friend branded a team. So we created all the merch for it. We created, so things like jerseys and hoodies and mugs and pens and everything.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I sort of stepped back and thought, oh my God, this could be a business. This is great. And he was a bit unsure, but he agreed to it. He didn't want to do it for long, which he made clear from the start. And we worked together on maybe 5 or 6 projects. So I'd go out, I'd use LinkedIn to reach out to people, particularly in law, in and around law. So it was, barristers, it was barristers' chambers, solicitors' practices. The first one we did was a legal recruitment company. And with them, I think they gave us, it was probably 400 quid to do, the foundational branding really for the whole business. So it was business cards, email banners, you name it. We did it. We split the cash, and when that came in, it felt like £1 million.
Well, as a student, £400. That's a lot of nights out.
I think so. I think you forget kind of how hard you used to have to physically work for money, because I worked at Subway as well. I worked at Domino's, and it was just like a whole new ball game where I could use my mind and then kind of manage something to earn cash. It was a game changer, and I sort of worked throughout uni to really make it reality by the time I came to the end of my course. But at the end of my course was COVID, which had kind of other options. But I stuck it out, made it work-ish, just by the skin of my teeth. I run out of cash, went into debt, and the only way I could carry it on was that my dad gave me a few £1,000s to really revitalise my finances and keep going.
Yeah.
I'd have been...
So obviously, left uni, so obviously got a taste for it during uni, and obviously did some projects, quite a few projects, got known locally, and then obviously left uni, and then went all in with the agency?
Yes. Maybe foolishly so, I think, because I didn't have any real retainers. And that would be my advice. You know, I know obviously the audience for this isn't, you know, startup owners, or brand new starts. But I think that's something that I always kind of advise people now when I'm talking to them is, just at least weigh up the pros and cons of going all in, because it's great because it gives you the motivation to make it work. But if it doesn't look like it's going to work, you're in too deep. And
well, I would say that's most people listening as owners of their stores. You know, they've gone through that transition of you know, we're going to maybe try and sell a couple of bits on eBay. You know, and they're working full time. You know, or we need to sell a couple of these things a month and that, or a week. So they put things on some of the other channels, eBay, Amazon, etc. Obviously, eBay's a lot easier, I think. The next thing you know, they've got half a garage full, gone from a bedroom full to half a garage full, and then they're working full time. But then that transition is then stopping the full time work or reducing that full time work, and going, you know, semi all in. But obviously, trying to balance the bills, depending on, and obviously, if you're living at home with your parents, is very different to having a wife and 2 kids and a mortgage and a car, and you know, they're different. But most people listening as owners, I think, will have gone through that journey, as I have, as every business owner has, of, you know, an idea. But ultimately, you know, when you build that brand or you build that business, you need to then, which is what we'll come to, you know, focus on the branding, you know, and the brand side of things, which obviously is what you're focused on now, primarily.
Yeah, exactly. We have a sort of core of services, really. It's all brand first and brand and design led. So we do sort of graphic design, web. As I was saying before, not a lot in eCom, but in general around the space. Yeah. And then video and social. And I think, it all kind of links together. I know one of the things that you maybe wanted to talk about was kind of the distinction there between, what's brand and what's marketing. And that for people that haven't either invested in it before or prioritized it before, can for some people be a silly question, but for some people be a really serious question. Yeah. You know, where are the boundaries and what do I really need to invest in first? I think in general, brand is kind of the foundation, and then marketing is going out to get customers. So branding is the overall impression that people have when they think or think about or see your business for the first time. Whereas marketing is all about pushing that brand out there for people to get new customers. So it's either customers right now, for instance, like PPC, or it's customers later. So things like lead magnets, and I know obviously your agency does things like webinars and things like that. So it's not necessarily to get customers right now, but at some point in the future. So that all falls into the marketing camp. And I think that it's also worth noting that brand isn't a logo. And that's the first thing that people think of. They think, I need some branding. This is really, really common, I think, for us as agencies here in the creative spaces. I need some branding. Can I have a new logo? Or, you know, is it the business card? And it's not any particular thing. And I think, you know, I'm a creative too at heart. I do a vast amount of the design in the business still. Yeah. And it's easy to sort of get caught up in it and think that, you know, the things that we're delivering there is the branding. It's not. The branding is the culmination of all of these little touch points. No,
I think that's great. I think, you know, it's all too common that a store will start, you know, and they may be using a template. When we go to e-commerce stores, they're gone, this template. You know, there's lots of well-known resources for your $99 or whatever it may be. You know, a lot of our listeners will have gone through that process of getting a nice template. But then that doesn't differentiate you. You've got a nice template, but anybody with $99 and half a cents can sort of go get that template. It looks okay, you know, and you put your colorway on it. But obviously building your own brand, you know, that's where I think that you start to get a bit more serious as a business and an e-com store. When you may be hitting that, it's hard to say, but £500,000, £1 million turnover point we've got so far. But every industry, no matter what you're in, is quite a crowded space. So to stand out, why would you say it's so important to focus on brand?
Yeah, I think you've almost kind of taken the conversation where I'd want to take it to answer that question. So you said it's a really crowded space. I think e-commerce in particular is very, very crowded, and you think the effort that your clients will go to try and differentiate themselves to make people convert at the end of the day, because especially in festive periods, for instance, for consumers and people's Christmas lists, you're putting in so much effort. You've just had Black Friday where your energy's been drained, and you've really, really tried to capture these customers. So when branding is all about that overall impression, you need to make sure that when a customer arrives at your store, that impression that you're giving to them is the right one.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're spending thousands and thousands of pounds on, PPC ads, for instance, to get people to your store, then when they arrive, if they don't trust your brand and your business, they're not going to put an order in. I just think it's very easy to track how much money it's costing you for acquisition, and how much you're spending to get a customer. I think the problem is, and why people neglect it a little bit, is it's often not that easy to see how much you've lost because
not
your
so much
brand's
tangible, is it? I think, right, we need to spend. Somebody goes, right, we're going to spend 10 grand on the brand. Oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
But I'm completely sold. Obviously from this chair and my standpoint. But I think when you hit certain plateaus or certain turnover numbers in a business, or obviously depends on the type of industry. But I just think in reality, you've got to stand out and you've got to look professional. So, like the moment you walked into our business, for me, that's when our brand starts. You walked in our door and it's like, oh, you get an impression. Yeah. You got an impression of our business. And I think when you go to an e-com store, you've seen, in theory, potentially a Google ad, which is the start of the brand. You're not even on the website yet, but the way that's crafted, the words that are used, the angle, whether it's, professional, fun, the tone, and then you land on the site. God, that's bloody awful. Oh, wow, this looks okay. And no doubt you've looked at loads of other sites. So, let's put it in the shoes of a, e-com store that's listing now. What are some very specific tactics that they can do on their sites, brand-wise, that's related to branding, to really stand out?
Yeah, I think it obviously depends where people are landing, and I don't think there's any kind of easy answer. And I think, really, I think to use what Carrie Ann said on the podcast that came out about podcasting, in marketing, it depends. But it does depend on, what you're wanting to get across. So, for instance, if you are selling skateboards, let's say, and your target market is, kind of hit skaters, and the first thing that they see when they come over is, like you said, a $49 Shopify template with just photos of the skateboards, and you can convert, then are they going to want to buy as much as if, for instance, you had a fully tailored landing page where you land on it and then there's video of the skateboard in action and the kind of people, and for instance, the kind of friendship huddles in the skate park at night where people are sat down and chatting, is what are you getting people to buy into? Because I think for a lot of e-com owners, probably the easiest way that they can think about branding is it's not really that they're getting people to buy the product, but really they're getting them to buy into the business and the brand and buy into the product. So I think it really does depend. Obviously, the touch points are massive. I think, especially with websites, try and incorporate video for sure, because I think that, it humanizes what you do. And I think that's almost always a good thing as humans, because people buy people. I know that that's often thrown around in kind of business to business context, but I think, especially for business to consumer, if you can see people either using the product, enjoying the product, or the kind of people who use that product are featured there, it's a lot easier for you to connect with it as a consumer and think, actually, maybe this is for me, and it's not just, a product that I need to serve a purpose. It's something that, I really want to buy and I want to keep and shout about, which I think is what e-com store owners need.
As a real differentiator, isn't it, that example? Whereas it's not so easy for the other 60 skateboard eCom stores to go shoot video. They've got a tool up potentially with a video producer and the video equipment and all the tech that goes with it, whether they buy it themselves for thousands or they hire somebody in for thousands. So that straight away, your level of content in that example, is in the top, the 2 or 3 that are using video or are using, whether that's user-generated content that they're incorporating, that might have video that's been created from the users, which would be great in that example, actually, wouldn't it? Yeah, because obviously it's a great product, and seeing that product being used by the different people. Yeah. It's just trying to stand out, isn't it? Which I think, going back to probably a couple of questions ago, really that's most things, isn't it? I think in most, as agency owners, standing out, getting attention in your niche, but as an e-com store owner, it's just so crowded, isn't it? What are maybe some of the mistakes you see people making when they're trying to stand out with their branding or just with their branding as a whole? I just wanted to introduce you very quickly to our sponsors, Pricing. Now, Pricing is a competitive price tracking and monitoring software that can dynamically change a product's prices on all sales channels. They work with brands such as Samsung, Sony, Suzuki to increase their online revenue. Now, if you run Google Shopping, which I know a lot of you absolutely do, this software is absolutely key to accelerating profits. One of the reasons I recommend Pricing to my clients is because you can find out your competitors' pricing and stock availability all in one simple to understand dashboard, giving you a huge competitive advantage. Now, if you have any inquiries and questions about this software or you're ready to get cracking, we have worked out a very, very special deal for our listeners where you can get a free month's trial and then 25% off for the first 3 months. Head to ecom1.com pricing and complete the inquiry form and we will connect our listeners to the Pricing team. Right, let's head straight back to the episode.
Branding works when it's consistent. I think the biggest mistake that, I've seen in some of our clients, in some of our prospects, is that they think there's, almost a magic button fix. And I think earlier you said, for instance, if you're investing £10,000 into branding, so to use that figure, so, to keep the consistency there, £10,000 on a logo, which, some of the boutique agencies could quite easily charge. It's not going to do you. So if you have that £10,000, then think about how are you going to spend it so that as many touch points as possible are covered. So for instance, it could be, let's say, 1,500 to 2,000 for the initial kind of brand deliverables of a logo, a business card, and an email banner. But then you might put 4,000 into video, which can be then used across the website. And I think don't fall into the trap of thinking everything needs to be perfect. It definitely doesn't need to be perfect, but it does need to be consistent. And then there are things like, thinking about sales documentation. Obviously, a website's another one, but just as many touch points as possible, because it's almost like a house of cards where if one part of this brand foundation that you're trying to build looks wrong or doesn't align with your customers or is in the wrong tone of voice or whatever it is, if it's not there, then the whole thing will kind of come crashing down, whether you realize it or not. And I think it's very, very easy for business owners to neglect it because they have a fun, shiny rebranding project, for instance, and a fun, shiny website. But then who's maintaining the website? Who's adding to the website? Who's making more general materials? So, for instance, you start offering new products, then do you want new sales documentation to accompany them? And it's trying to think of how can you build in from the start when you start investing in this, how can you build in a long-term plan? So maybe instead of spending that 10,000 all in one go, spend 5,000 at the start and then over the year, break the other, for £400 a month, get some general support off either a part-time employee or a freelancer or, an agency.
I guess that made me think of, so there's the brand in terms of the look and feel of different assets, but then there's the brand in terms of the way that your team operates day to day with, an inquiry that comes in, the way that they pack the box, the impression that you give on every single touch point, which is not designing something, it's not creating a physical thing, but you're creating an emotion and an experience, which I think is an absolute, delighting, as, there's various things we could, cliches we could throw in here, but, delighting and then retaining those clients, not just because we've got a nice logo and it's in the simplest form. Obviously, that's not branding, but that's an element, of course. But having an amazing experience, and I think that is an area that, again, you can really stand out for potentially not a lot, So, just one of my clients comes to mind. This is just a silly, simple, but really cool thing he does. He just puts a little packet of Skittles in every order. He's doing thousands of orders a month, thousands of orders a month. Puts a little bit of Skittles in. I know the people that put handwritten notes in every order, obviously using some tech to sort of handwrite them, but just that, that's part of the brand, part of sort of giving that extra, the way that you answer customer service emails. If there is a challenge or an issue with an order, that's an opportunity to really stand out, I think, and get in front of that client and turn them from maybe a potential real bad situation if there's been a big issue with delivery, and turn them into an absolute obsessive fan because you've gone over, maybe the owner has driven to that customer with their box of coffee that they bought and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, like, that's the guy that owns the firm." Those sort of, what would you say to that? Those sort of delight moments that companies can do.
Yeah, I think it's probably not, I don't know if you'd look at it as, is it a necessary or is it an optional? I think that eCom owners probably can't afford to neglect those opportunities because you've got to think, who are you competing with? And, eCom stores are, competing with the giants of the tech world, where they have strong brands. Like Amazon, for instance, has the strong customer service brand. So if you're going to give, shoddy customer service, then people aren't going to buy from you again. Yeah. And I think it only takes that one disgruntled person to leave that one disgruntled review, which then stops somebody buying. Mm-hmm. So the question is, can you afford not to? And I think, like you said, there are so many different things people can think about investing in. I think it all starts obviously with planning to again see the touch points of the brand, like the packaging, like the thank you notes, and then just see again for your budget and balancing the time depending on the scale of the business and who's in it, is what can you do. But I think if you go that little bit extra for customers, then they're well more likely to want to buy from you again. And I think it's the things that they're not purchasing that they appreciate the most. So like the Skittles, because they expect let's go back to skateboard. I don't know if people aren't looking at the video of this, I'm not a skateboarder. I'm far from it. What are you talking? I saw you skateboard.
Yeah, right. I think I took my kids about 14 years ago skateboarding, and I think I might have actually stood on what? Grab the rail. That was my limit.
So let's use knee pads as the example.
Okay, knee pads, yeah, definitely.
So if you're selling knee pads, then people expect those knee pads when they arrive to be knee pads and to be well packed and shipped on time and the rest of it. That's all a given when you're ordering. Yeah. But what they might not be expecting is the good luck on your skateboard, handwritten note or whatever it is, or let us know how
top
you get on, or
tips to not use the knee pads too much by staying on your skateboard.
Exactly. So it's those extra things I think that wow us. Is
what could we do? We could do a QR code, scan the QR code, funny video of you staying on your skateboard, or the owner of the skateboard company falling off onto his lovely, what do you call them, pads? Knee pads, that's it. I was going to say shin pads then, that's a whole different game.
It depends how bad you are. I'd recommend from what you're saying to shin pad as well, I think.
Okay, so those touch points to make up the brand. I think the guys that are listening now, what are some things that you can do? Obviously, Thomas given you a few ideas there, but some simple things that some are really low cost. The way that you're packaging, the way that you're adding in different information into the packaging. We talk about it a lot, but obviously we've just come out of a very busy season. Black Friday, Christmas, New Year, etc. A lot of, most households have had however many packages. Think of the packages that you've had. Some of them are just brown box, really poor experience. You open that box, there's nothing in it other than the thing that you ordered in another box. Or the guys that, invest in maybe personalized packaging that says, "Hey, Tommy," as you open the box, it's personalized and printed. That's all part of the brand. It's all part of that story. And I think it's absolutely key. Something we've sort of doubled down with the podcast, a lot of different events that we're running in our business for e-com stores. It's just so crowded, as it is in any industry. So if you're not investing in your brand, so let's say there's a few people saying, yeah, they're listing like whatever, we've got a new template, we put a new logo on. I think we're doing enough, because I see guys doing 10 million quid a year and they refuse to really listen to this side of things on the branding? Or, what would you say to them?
I think I'm a realist, and I have conversations with people all the time that will propose a project or think they need a project when they might not, and there is a small chance that actually, look, what they have might be working for them now. But the point is that there are glass ceilings in front of all businesses, and yet you might, with what you have, you'll be able to grow to a point. But it's how do you speed up that growth? How do you retain that growth? And how do you increase the ceiling of where you're going to be able to grow to? And I think, I'm here obviously as a big advocate for branding, but I'm not here to convince anybody that they need to do it if they really don't think they do. I mean, but what you will find is that if the brand's working right, and there's a strategy in place that identifies and it's a great thought experiment when you do go back to branding, is to go back to basics of who are you as a business and why do people buy, but then who buys as well. And I think when you go through that process, just that process alone is, I think, invaluable for a lot of business owners. But then when you go through and create all the materials and touch on, like we said, all of these touch points, that what you'll have at the end will be something that will be able to last a decent amount of time. And I think branding needs to be refreshed constantly and consistently. But what you'll have is a platform really to grow from. And I think we spoke earlier, and I said that I think branding is the foundation for good marketing. And I think what you will find, and obviously you'll be able to touch on this as well, is that if the brand's right, the marketing will be a lot easier, because you don't have to try and sell as much in the marketing. You're just kind of raising the awareness so that when people do land, they already know exactly why they should buy. Yeah. They can see it. And I think if you're having to try and convince somebody, all the time and incessantly that this is the thing you need to buy for your problem, and you really educate them and, really ram it down their throats so they'll buy it, you've wasted a lot of money. Yeah. So why didn't you just set it up so they knew they should buy it when they first saw it?
So I think if you're with us, what budget have you allocated this year to brand? What have you got under brand to focus on? A couple of thoughts there for you to have a think about. So change of pace, Tommy. I think we're going to go to, so a lot of our listeners will be running their own business. The marketeers, business owners, they will be solopreneur, different size businesses, but ultimately running a business, can be a lonely place. I run my business, and it some days can be quite challenging. How do you manage sort of running your own business as a solopreneur?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. It's unsexy, unglamorous, and lonely, for sure. I think, especially in the early days, very lonely, because you take the step to start your own business, and we spoke earlier kind of about that transition, but you sort of go from being excited to almost doomed, potentially. You feel like, oh my God, why did I do this? And I think, the harsh reality is that, a lot of people probably that you want to care about it don't, because this is your thing. No one's going to buy into it as much as you. I think it's difficult when you first start taking on staff and you realise, why don't you care as much as I do? It's because it's not theirs. So it's really difficult. I think it can be made a lot less lonely with the people that you surround yourself with. So I'd say my biggest piece of advice there would be make friends with other business owners, and not just business owners in a similar boat to you, but established business owners. If you're not a startup and you feel you've been established for a number of years, then still make friends with the startup business owners, because they'll be able to teach you something too. And I think I managed to find a support network, not people that I go to when I'm stressed, but I feel less stressed because I have the network. And it's not almost a business network, but more of just a circle of friends. Because people in general are friends with people that are similar to them, and when you have all the same problems, and no matter what industry you're in as well, you have the same stresses. So by being around people like that, just in general, it gives you a much better mental space, I think that's great. Not alone.
Great advice, Tommy. I think having a chat with people whether that's in your business, in your niche, or just maybe similar, a couple of steps behind you, 3 or 4 steps in front of you. You then feel, sort of just puts a pin in a few things, get a few different opinions, a few different ideas. I think it can be, especially this industry, it's, hiding behind the PC potentially, or Mac, depending on where you go. It can be quite, more, I guess, if you go back, pre-internet, you'd be in a big retail store and you'd be a lot of people around you, or you'd be in a factory, running a factory, or if you're a business owner sort of thing, and you've got people all the time. Whereas this game, a lot of people run an eCom store, depending on the site, obviously you can run it from your laptop, or, obviously if you've got 20,000 square feet, you're in and out of that warehouse, you've got different teams and whatnot, you may be bouncing off, but it can be, I would say, more lonely than, 25 years ago running a business. I haven't got really facts around that, but I just sort of, having those conversations, having a good peer group, getting involved in the sort of, whether that's the local, different business things that are local, the more national things that are in your industry. Yeah. So what maybe, I think that's great, sort of touching on that. There's some of the things that maybe don't get spoken about as a business owner. Do you think, what are some of the difficulties that some of our listeners might relate to that just doesn't really get spoken about?
Yeah, I genuinely love speaking about this. So I don't think in general the struggles are talked about enough. I think the biggest one for me is balance, and I don't know what it means. Work-life balance. I honestly think, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this. I've asked a lot of people this year. I don't think work-life balance exists for business owners. I could be wrong. So if you disagree, get in touch. I'm interested to hear stories from people who have made it work. I actually spoke with. Do you watch The Apprentice?
A little bit, yeah.
Do you know Tim Campbell?
Yeah.
Judges, yeah. So I met him a few weeks ago and asked him about it, and he said, this is the most helpful advice I've heard on it so far, is that as a business owner, don't strive for a work-life balance, because balance suggests that it needs to be equally weighted between family life and work life, or personal life and work life. What you should really be looking for is a happy work-life blend where, they're kind of woven between one another. And that, it doesn't really mean anything in particular that, but I think, as a business owner, I think that people know when they need one of more or the other. I think I'm an obsessive worker, an addicted worker. I'm really obsessed. I find it very, very generally and genuinely difficult to put the laptop down. It could be, 11 p.m. on a Saturday evening, partner's watching TV, I'm working on the living room table. I fold the laptop down, go and sit next to her, and then the laptop's looking.
And then you're bored and you get your laptop out again.
If you're listening to this, darling, I love you lots. Not at all. Don't get bored of you one bit. But no, I think it is very difficult to put that down. I think the biggest thing I've learned this year, and I don't think I understood it as much last year, being fairly new into business, was to know when to just flip the switch. Because I think in general my life is unbalanced. I'm happy with that because I love the work. But I have to know when I press the button and the scales just completely flip, where work isn't my priority for a few days at all, and it's all family and all personal. And I think just knowing that button is there is something that a lot of people fall into the trap of forgetting, and it's easy to forget when you're busy.
That's great advice, I think, because obviously everyone listening is in a different maybe stage in their life, different stage in their business. Obviously, when you're setting something up, it's sort of gun-ho, non-stop, but even 10 years later, it can still be the same, if not even more of a pace. But I think that balance changes depending on sort of priorities, things going on in your life. But I think you've got to have things outside of work that sort of can just, I think having time away from work, then you become a lot more productive in work. So if you're just all work, sometimes it's all work, but it's maybe not that productive. So that extra 20 hours you did that week, maybe it was 20 hours of just being busy rather than being productive and focused. So having that time out, I think, is key. Yeah,
I think so. I think, as a smaller business owner, those, 20 hours of not been as productive. You know, you have a lot more stuff you need to do, and the buck stops with you. So it can be really difficult to say no to those extra hours. I think I'm surely averaging over 70 hours a week in, week out, and I have done for months and months and months. And it was adjustment getting here, but I feel this is, for me, this is the worst part. I feel really lazy if I
with a set of less than 7-hour week sort of thing.
Yeah, and I feel lost, and that's something that that I need to work on, and I definitely don't have.
But if you're happy doing that,
life is going well, like personal life. Yeah, I have an amazing partner, really supportive. But also, you know me a little bit now. You won't want to spend any meaningful time with me on an evening on a weekday. Let me work, touch base at the weekends. But I have an amazing partner who is really supportive of me, and I think I wouldn't be able to do it without her for sure. But yeah, it's something that I can't keep doing. I can't do it for another 20 years. I can't do it for another 5 years.
We'll find. We'll get you back on in 5. That's for sure. Let's see. Give us an update. So, what's next for our identity agency then?
Exciting times. I think I've realised that. So our model is I have a couple of part-time employees, an army of 5 or 6 freelancers who work between typically 2 and 5 days a week, depending on their skills and how regularly generally they want to work for us. But I need also right-hand person. So I'm going to look to hire those. This has been recorded, mid-December. I'm hoping that by the end of Jan, that would be nice. But end of Feb for sure. I need that person. So I want someone who's a really talented designer to lead the team and to sort of build their own. We're very, very small, but to almost start building their own department within the business. I did that with copywriting, so now that's kind of its own thing that sits in between obviously design and social media, but as something I don't need to worry about, and I want to stop worrying about design as much and help to grow the business, because I think when I'm running around like a busy fool, I'm doing the £10 jobs and sort of negating the £1,000 jobs. So a
key hire at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and then
to free up your time to
panic about how I'm going to pay for it. I think. That's to work on growing the business and generating more leads, increase our capacity a little. Exciting
times for you. I've sort of watched your journey from afar. I guess not that far. You're like a mile from my office, so so we'll I look forward to following your journey myself. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm allowed to end every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book to recommend to our listeners? Anything you want. It can be branding. It can be, you name it. It doesn't have to be anything to do with branding. It can be anything at all.
Well, I'll give you 2 real quick ones then.
Yeah.
So first one, business book wise, I read The Profit First recently, and that was a game changer, because we're being, we're a baby business really, sort of trying to exit startup land. We're always poor in general, living kind of month to month. I was the last person to be paid. I went from kind of May time all the way through to October without taking my full salary, and my full salary at the moment is £1,000 a month. So it was rough. But after reading that, it kind of completely flipped a switch in my head, where I think about money a lot differently. And I think the analogy in there that's if you find that you don't have cash in the bank and you're worrying about cash, which as an eCom business you don't want to be, because it's a cash intensive operation. Read Profit First by Mike McCullough. It's a great book. Fiction wise, it's basically a kid's book.
All right, cool.
I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I think there's something coming out that can be, I don't want to jinx it and say it's big, but it feels like it could be. It's called Skandar and the Unicorn Thief, which is about a load of kids. When I say kids book, I mean, late teens. We'll go with teens. A load of kids that go to, an island that's just off the south coast of the UK where they fly unicorns. And there's a lot more to it than that. But I think what's really unique about it, and again, I said I was a geek earlier in my defense. What's really unique about that is that the whole world has been crafted a little bit like Harry Potter, where it's close enough to reality, and it's still set here and now in the UK.
There's unicorns.
But there's a whole different side of it going on.
Our world within our world, sort of
within
thing.
the world.
Yeah,
So really interesting. I think if you're into fantasy, either read that or listen to it. It's not a long book. There's 2 out at the moment.
Yeah.
This one's coming out shortly.
Yeah, well, brilliant. Thanks for coming on the show. Those that want to find out more about you, more about Identity Agency, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, either connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Thomas Atkins on LinkedIn, or visit our website. It's at identityagency.co.uk.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Cheers. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast. You're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.